Welcome to the April meeting of the Facilities and Planning Committee meeting. I think I'd like to start. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes of January 15th, 2025? If so, could I have a motion to approve the minutes from January 15th, 2025?
So moved.
Thank you. Second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, thank you. Motion carries. We'll now move on to the information items. I'll turn the meeting over to Mr. Bizek and Ms. Deflaw from the Campus Transformation and Facilities Management, and they'll give us our campus updates.
Thank you, Dr. Walker. May we have the presentation, please? There we go. I have a number of updates for you today on campus transformation. We'll start with those first. We'll touch on the Glick Center, spend a fair bit of time on the outpatient health center and ambulatory enabling. And then we've added a new line for the planning, design, construction projects. A number of projects are really sort of related to the ambulatory enabling. We're extending that and thought they were worth bringing in front of this group. And then we'll finish with a quick update on parking, open space, and legacy building work that we're doing. So let's go to the next slide, please. Glick Center, next slide, please. Okay, this is the Glick Center closeout. We are very close to that. We had hoped that we would be done at this point, but at this point, we have certificate of final completion has been submitted. We're doing our final review. Final payment application has been sorted out, and we're going through our final review on that. So you know what the final amount that will be returned after we close out the GMP contract. So we just have a couple more reviews, final sign off and final payment that will finally be finished. So just wanted to make sure that the board was aware of that. We had hoped last time we met that we would actually have the check issued already, but we're that close. So just about finished with that one. And that's really all that's left as part of that main project to build that facility. Any questions? Okay, let's move on to the next. We're going to talk now for a bit about the outpatient health center. Wanted to give you a typical construction update. Lots of activity out on the site. We're still running somewhere around 80 construction personnel on site daily. Main things going on now, some exterior work, a fair bit of work on the loading dock and the pedestrian passageway that connects to the garage. So all the underground work is now complete. Now working on the wall systems, the structural systems in place, the roof, that sort of thing. That's all happened since the last time. So more to go on that, but enclosure is just about ready to start for that. Interior construction inside the building. I think the last time we spoke, they were doing quite a bit of framing on the 4th and 5th floors. Those were the 2 floors that were sort of the least complete. The framing now on those floors is substantially complete. So now we're looking at door frame installation on that floor, finishing the support steel for the X-ray on the in the ortho areas. Have moved down to the lower floors to rework the metal studs. The framing there was substantially complete when the project was paused. So the bulk of that framing remains in place. We are making some modifications based on the redesign we went through last year. And part of that was to widen some of the corridors to meet an ambulatory requirements. Other parts were functional. So that work is underway. When that happens, some door frames and existing casework is being removed that had already been installed. All that's being removed carefully so we can reuse the materials. So that's stored and will be reused on site. Down to mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems. The 4th and 5th floors, like I said, the framing is substantially complete so that now they're doing the rough in. So putting in outlets, switches, all the things that go behind the walls. That rough in work is going on. Overhead work was done on much of that during the framing process, so they're tidying that up and have moved down to lower floors to do some of the revisions for the overhead mechanical. That would be to the ductwork and air supply systems and that sort of thing. So a lot of work on multiple floors going on at the same time. The one piece of long lead that we've talked about this before is electrical equipment that's in fabrication. That order was placed, probably by the end of last year. So right now, just a quick note on materials and supplies. We haven't seen any issues related to the materials that we use in the way of cost issues that have arisen. Most of the material that we have had been purchased prior to any tariffs or anything like that. But it's something we're keeping an eye on. The couple things we've talked about is we still have some wood doors and some other wood products for casework to buy. Some of those orders have been placed. It's just a matter of whether that product would jump at all. Again, between that and some of the metal pieces that we do have to buy is a pretty small proportion of what is left to do. We have a great deal of material that's already here on site and either stocked inside the building or in warehouse. So keeping track of it, but right now it's manageable. Don't see any issues. None have been brought to our attention, let me put it that way, from any of our vendor suppliers. Let's go to the next slide.
Question.
Oh, yes.
If I may, on that point. I presume you're talking about the construction side of it.
Yes.
Not necessarily the medical equipment side.
That's another one.
Yeah.
So, Eileen, why don't you comment on just where we are with that process?
Yeah, on the medical equipment side, we are in the middle of procurement, and what we've seen over just the past couple of weeks is most of our vendors kind of rushing us to issue a PO so they can lock in the pricing for us. We're also working with supply chain because a lot of the products that we're also purchasing are through our GPOs, which there may be some language in there that guarantees pricing for us. So they're looking at that right now. But most of the big ticket items that impact the construction within the building, we've already issued the POs for. On the furniture side, we're out to bid right now. The bids are due Friday. So I think that will be our first true test to see the impact of tariffs on that. So that's due again Friday. We'll do an analysis to see where we're at on the furniture side. But I think we're pretty good covered on equipment so far.
You know, just thinking pricing is obviously a critical concern, but also lead time. I
Yes.
gotta believe that's a bit of a significant unknown at this moment.
One of the issues I've run across here and have talked to our team about is anything that we're getting from overseas, regardless of that's next door or not, can get caught up in customs. And I've had issues where I've had pieces of equipment or materials that are there for much longer lengths of time. So we're trying to keep tabs on what's going on there. Concern is that if we have a depleted workforce who's, dealing with those issues, that could add time. So that's why, in a way, sort of hurrying to try to get any of the last orders placed as soon as possible so that we can at least absorb some of that without damaging the schedule.
And we,
A concern is that any particular container could have some mixed goods, which could be very complicated in terms of the supply chain of these particular goods. Have gotten their tariff squared away, but in that same container are others that are not, and we're sort of held up to the lowest common denominator.
yeah, and I think, we have to keep in good contact with our vendors on that. And that even on the equipment side, we started our whole list with the longest lead items based on what our vendors were telling us. And typically what happens is they give you worst case scenario for, it'll be 16 weeks for this item. Once we issue a PO, typically that timeline shrinks a little bit. So, we have an equipment planner that we're working with, so they keep constant communication. We meet every week to check on the status of everything too. So,
Good luck.
yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
I think probably the thing we'll look at is getting stuff as soon as we can, even if that means we got to pay to store it for a while. Better to have it here than risk the other end. So, yeah.
That's the choice.
But yeah, it's kind of on our minds multiple times a day.
Mhm.
All right, let's go to the next slide. I just wanted to highlight again the zone on the east side of the building where there's a lot of work on the loading dock and the connector. That's the primary exterior work, although some work has been done in the front too. We completed the brickwork a while ago, but now the bollards and some of the other things, the amenities in the front have gone in. So the bulk of the work is in the building. Do you have a question? No. Okay. Let's move on to the next slide. Okay, again, just wanted to give you a sense of, as the building stacks, what's going on. So the primary work right now, like I said, is on the upper floors, finishing all the rough in. So all the conduit and electrical boxes, that sort of thing. As you move to the lower floors, overhead work and modifications. Right now, not doing much work on one. That's often the floor that you finish toward the end because so much flows in and out of the first floor. But a great deal of work had already been done down there already. So again, just giving you a sense of that. Next slide, please. Okay, just wanted to give you a few site photos. Actually, when I looked at this morning to make my notes, I realized that these are a good 2 weeks old, so it's already beyond this. Try to get everything together for the board book. So, but you get a sense here, the steel structure's already in place for the loading dock and the connector. The concrete was already formed up and ready to go, so the bulk of that's probably already been done. The work now is focused on completing the exterior enclosure, which is aluminum and glass curtain wall system. You can see some of the masonry work was getting started back then as well, and that enclosure is well on its way. So next slide. Few shots of the interior. You can see upper floors that most of the framing is in place. Some of the structure for the casework that's going to go in, that sort of thing. On the lower right, hard to tell, but if you look at it, you can tell that the steel frames for the doors are already in place. And so there's quite a bit. That it's advanced quite a bit, really, since the last time we spoke. Next slide. This is just on the lower floors. The one on the top right is really toward the west side of the building. That's predominantly public area. And you can see there's some overhead work going on here on the left photo. On the lower photo to the lower right, there's where some modifications to the wall systems are being done. Again, the bulk of that is going to remain, but some modifications to meet the new requirements. So all of those kinds of things are going on at the same time. So we really have work going on almost every floor of the building every day. Next page, please. Okay, so upcoming work, like I said, concrete slab on grade. The main thing now is to complete the exterior framing and sheathing. Actually, the roofing, I believe, is now pretty much complete on that area for the loading dock and the connector. Interior construction, we're close enough. By the next time we meet, the drywall on those upper floors will be substantially in place, and we'll be headed toward taping and finishing and that sort of thing. And then we'll move into the lower floors and start to finish that work there. So we're not that far off from starting to look at reinstalling some of the casework, the cabinetry, and that sort of things, and the final doors. And then MEP work. Remember that most of the work we're doing mechanical, electrical, above ceiling is the modifications of systems that were already in place. There's not a lot of new equipment that needs to be done, which is a good thing. So next slide, please. Project schedule. I think we looked at this last time. Our contractors indicated our certificate of occupancy, temporary certificate of occupancy will be complete no later than February 13th. We're still working with them on what our best options are to move that date toward us. We think there are some, but on the other hand, because of some of the uncertainty about delivery of equipment, we don't want to get too much ahead of ourselves here. But I think for our planning purposes, we think that can be pulled back a ways. And that leads us toward having enough time to do all the training and that we need an orientation for people to be able to see patients at the end of that first quarter or so next year. So it'd be first patients. Next slide, please. So now that leads us into the transition planning and activation. I'm going to ask Eileen to talk about that because that's the second half of this.
Great, thanks. As I just mentioned, we're in the middle of procurement for equipment. We probably purchased 30%, most of the big ticket items that impact the facility. So we'll continue to do that through April and May, and then we should have most things procured by that point. The furniture bid, as I had mentioned, is due tomorrow. We'll take a little bit of time to assess that. The way we did the bid was basically based on new furniture standards that we're trying to put in place system-wide. Comes off what we did in Glick with some modifications. So we've broken up the packages. I think we have like 7 different packages. So there's opportunity with this bidding process for multiple vendors to be able to get the work once we've done our analysis on that. We just finished up all the IS validation meetings with each of the clinics and stakeholders. Again, that's just identifying how many computers, how many Voceras, everything that's needed in place in each one of the clinics. The artwork coordination is underway right now. We're also coordinating that with our interior signage and wayfinding folks so that, you know, like artwork isn't exactly where wayfinding should be. A great example in Glick is you come off those public elevators on the ground level, you're looking for radiology. All you see is artwork right in front of you and no signage to get you to radiology. So we're trying to, you know, lessons learned and be a little more strategic about those placements as well. We have engaged our consultants for the transition planning and activation activities, which is all of the work to bring this building alive. We've spent a lot of time talking to you guys about the construction, but this is how we bring it to life. So we did implement a planning structure. If you can move to the next slide, please. We kicked off at the end of March with our steering committee, which is primarily our executive leadership team. There's a lot on this chart, but just to show you the breadth and depth of participation that we will have from our providers and staff as we plan all the initiatives to get us ready for the building. So we will have an operations committee. Down below, we set up all of the different committees and clinics based on our new organizational structure that we have in place on the ambulatory side. So we've grouped primary care initiatives, medical specialties, then we have surgery, specialty functions, and imaging, and then our support services, all those teams that support the clinical operations of the building. Again, our IS technology, and then the human side of all of this, the HR, the staffing, the training and education that needs to happen, the change management that needs to happen. And then in addition, up in the green where it says FF&E, that's the furniture equipment that's all been ongoing. I have added as part of the original, the main structure of this is the decommissioning. Once we move everybody into the new building, we know that we have plans to, you know, reoccupy the OPP in other areas. So there's a whole initiative about, you know, getting rid of the old equipment, old supplies, all that kind of stuff. So we don't want to lose sight of all that activity. So we've included it here. So next slide, please. This is high-level timeline for all the activities that we have. Basically, you know, 4 different phases that we're going through. We kick off next week with all of the committees with an overview. One of the fortunate things is a lot of the stakeholders have been involved since day one of the pre-design work that we've done, so that's great. But we're also bringing in a lot more of the support services people. So we'll have an orientation next week for everybody. And then we have our co-chairs who are responsible for each one of those committees and moving that work forward. We'll have a kickoff. And then monthly, we'll meet with our team. We'll go through the transition activities, making sure we've identified everything that needs to be in place. What are the hours of operation that are going to be for each clinic? Things to that level of detail. We're also have identified through the operational assessment that we did back in December, operational workflows that we'll need to look at. So we have a list of about 8 of those that we'll pull our stakeholders in. One of the big things is patient arrival. You know, how do you get to the new building? If you come in the front door, if you come in the back door, if you're coming from Glick, how do you get to the different locations, all that. So we'll work through all of those workflows with the teams as well. And then we'll get to the point where we can do the training, orientation, and education for our team. So right now, based on the schedule Jim just shared with us, construction, we'll have our temporary certificate of occupancy mid-February. That's when I can get everybody in without PPE to do the day in the life activities, department orientation, the medical code response drills that we'll do prior to us opening. So right now we're looking at, it says go live on 4/4, but that's a Saturday. So Monday, the 6th would be first patient. That's the targets that we have for the outpatient health center. So any questions on that project? Nope, great. Next slide. Then to take you back over to the ambulatory enabling projects, again, these are the last projects we're wrapping up from the initial group that was started about 2.5 years ago. So at Parma, we have the heart and vascular clinic. So that is under construction right now, as well as the pain management center, which will be on the 4th floor of that same building. Both of those projects should come online by September. Again, we have all the equipment and furniture because most of that stuff was purchased back before we paused all of these projects. The Mac Clinic expansion on the second floor there, the construction renovation activities are complete. We've gotten approval for all of the operating items that are needed, furniture, IS. So we're just waiting on delivery dates so that we can identify a go live date. And again, for the Mac Clinic, they have space over there now at Parma, but because of the demand for their services, we're giving them a vacant clinic so that they can improve their access and decrease the time it takes for them, patients to get in to see them. So next slide, please. One of the newer projects, actually two new projects that we've added at Parma, utilizing the same AEP funding and budgeting that was approved by the board a few years ago, is the replacement of the MRI. Last year we had some equipment failure over there, so that is in process right now with our architects. We've got the conceptual design worked out, so we just need to work through construction documents and implementation. We'll have a timeline for that. Also physical therapy expansion, they are located over there now. And this was part of the original AEP project from a couple of years ago that was put on hold. So we're looking at that. We met with the stakeholders earlier in the week. We have a walkthrough tomorrow just to define the scope of work that needs to be done. Again, this is to open up access for our patients so we can start, see a decrease in the time it takes to get in. And then the final project at Beechwood is the third floor, which is our medical specialties and the pain management center there. So we're in the process of finalizing the construction documents, and then we'll send that out for bid. And then once we have that, we'll have a time frame. This is going to take a little bit longer because it's a fully occupied floor, and we basically have to build out pain management procedure rooms and then go through and refresh all the exam spaces. So they have a whole host of services that are seen there, women's services, and all the specialty services that are there. So next slide, please. That's AEP. So as Jim mentioned, we put another slide in here on other planning, design, and construction projects that are ongoing in our spare time. We do all the rest of these things. So I'm going to touch base on some updates at Cleveland Heights Behavioral Health Hospital, a quick update on the emergency department renovation. We're just what's the word I'm looking for? Commencing the work on the outpatient plaza refresh and some of the MEP upgrades that we're doing there. Last time the board approved the dollars associated with all the branding and signage that we're doing system-wide. And then we're also moving forward. Jim showed you that $5.5 million that we're saving on the GLIC project. We did have shelf space in the GLIC for future imaging, so we're going to move forward with that. And then I believe Jim's going to talk about the 2025
I'll do that later.
qualified professional list later. Great. Next slide, please. All right, Cleveland Heights, and this is just some additional modifications that we're making to the inpatient space, that was completed more than 2.5 years ago. So based on stakeholder feedback, we're moving forward with additional modifications. One of the biggest ones is for security and safety for the staff. This picture here demonstrates what we did in, I believe it was the Psych ED, Karen, where we put up the barrier between the staff work area there and the patients, just because there tend to be some violence. So we're looking at that same type of setting in the inpatient units. So my construction manager is working on that. The other big thing that we're doing is upgrading the communication systems for Metro Health PD. That wasn't upgraded when we built the hospital, and so they were experiencing, between the new hospital building and the old building, some gaps in communication. So that's all being upgraded as we speak. So that'd be great.
Yeah, if I can interject a little bit here. One of the reasons I kind of wanted to get this in front is that each of these seems small and sort of independent by itself, but when you take a look at them in the aggregate, all of these are pieces of creating a bigger picture here. So you can see that the AEP, some of the things that followed on that were not originally AEP, are accomplishing the same kinds of things. where we're improving facilities we have, we're expanding them to increase the capability of access, that sort of thing. Or at Cleveland Heights, being able to modernize a few places that we didn't get to last time so that it's more appropriate for the patient care. So all these pieces really fit together, and I've tried to make sure that we understand how strategically they fit into where we were going, as well as the baseline of where we're going to go after these things are finished. So that's really trying to understand those pieces. And I thought when I looked at them one at a time, it wasn't always apparent. Now it is. Yes.
How much does something like that cost?
This is all within the budgeted dollars that we have already. What we have to work with on this, and we don't have all the pricing back yet. We have about $900,000 still remaining in this project that we can get some of this work done.
Right. I think the biggest thing in this one is the creation of additional seclusion rooms that were not there in the original design. Found a creative way to do that. That utilizes the existing design as best we can with a few modifications. So working hard to stretch the dollars we've got to accomplish all this.
What is the interoperability of our police department communications with our municipal partners? You understand the question?
I do.
Yes. We still know if we can answer it.
Yeah, it's probably not the right phone.
Yeah, good question. Yeah.
And by the way,
Yeah.
since 9/11, that
Yeah.
was the big question for the entire country.
Yeah.
And advancements have been made seismically, but I'm curious as to where we fit into the continuum.
And those are good questions. I know from my previous employer being very involved in emergency management, that, with the new regional presence, I know our police department and our emergency management services work very closely with all the regional areas too.
Working closely is one thing, but if there was an event,
Yes,
can we dial into the same frequency together?
I believe yes. I believe yes.
Yeah, through emergency management, there's a protocol that is actually from the federal level all the way down into the regional level, so that there's always going to be a path for communication.
Are we on the MARC system?
I couldn't tell you
Yes, we are.
every detail.
Well, that's
Yeah.
terrific.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all things are possible with that shared system, so that's good news.
Yeah, and one of the other things that we are looking at right now too is a new police department on this campus as well, which all of the, communications and everything, because they've been in the basement of the towers for many, many years. So all of that will be looked at too.
Right.
But I know that the communication system since 9/11 has been thoroughly enhanced, so. Okay. Good question. Okay, next slide. The emergency department, I know everybody's been hearing about the emergency department for a while. So we started a pre-design phase back in October. We brought on board an architectural, our partnership, Ubiquitous Design and Boswick Design Group. So they've spent the end of last year, the first part of this year, going in, observing how our emergency department functions. They've talked with the stakeholders, talked with the providers to come up with observations and challenges that they see. I know if I asked Dr. Emmerman, he would like a brand new emergency department, but we can make this one work. We just need to bring it into how we provide emergency medicine today and address the volumes that we have. So next slide, please. So what we have done, I mean, obviously, we have an operating emergency department that's very busy. So we're breaking this into different phases. So, we'll continue to plan the entire department, but what we don't want to do is, wait 18 months for planning to be done before we start any work. So we've identified with the team these different areas within the emergency department to focus on, so that hopefully before the end of this year, we can actually start the renovation and construction. So area one obviously is the front entry, and actually I think our numbers show like more than 70% of our inpatients are admitted through the emergency department. So this is really the front door to the hospital. So as a separate effort, we're looking at the exterior of this. I think as many of you know, the way you drive into the emergency entrance is contrary to how it should be, and you're dropping off the patient on the outside instead of inside. You come in, it's very congested right there where we have the security system, and then, trying to find your way to the entry of the ED. So the area one is, our first area of focus of how do we clean all that up? How do we make it very easy. Once you walk into that vestibule, here's where I need to go to get to the emergency department. And then area 2 is where we have behavioral health within the emergency department. So we're looking at that, but I know from an operating standpoint, they're looking at how do we better provide behavioral health in this setting. So now that we have the Psych ED over at Cleveland Heights, that impacts how we need to plan here. The other thing we're trying to be strategic about, we've got the behavioral health component in the emergency department. We also have the clinical decision unit in the middle of the department. And so we're looking at all of these areas as to how do we reconfigure so that we can enhance capacity. One of the observations that our team had as we look at the numbers and we run the numbers, typically within an emergency department, you should be able to see about 1,500 visits per exam room. Ours is probably about 900, one, because we're a level 1 trauma, so we have higher acuity patients, but we also have the issue of boarders in the ED. So we've got our patients sitting in exam rooms that should turn pretty quickly that aren't. So those are some of the challenges that we're trying to address. Again, this isn't just a refresh project for us. You know, we have to do the cosmetics, but we have to improve workflow and efficiency within the department as well. So that whole area 1 really then becomes, you know, like the fast track area. How do we get people in and out that only need to be here for 30 minutes, 90 minutes? Next slide, please. And then, you know, on that third area is also the ambulance entrance. So, you know, when we opened up Glick, we put the cross corridor from Glick to the existing buildings right through the vestibule of the ambulance entrance. So that's a real challenge for all of us. So we're looking at options there too. Also options of cleaning that up and enhancing security at that entrance as well. So this is just a conceptual design of some of the things that, you know, we're working with our design team on enhancing that whole front entrance, you know, bumping out into the rotunda a little bit. There's the old where we used to have the metal detector, and now that we're using a bulb, it's kind of wasted space. So we're looking to capture some more space to make better utilization of the waiting area. And again, for those patients that need to come in and out quickly. Also with this, we've got imaging at the table as well. Lots of our patients go through imaging. There's a couple things we can do in the existing department to enhance their operations as well. So this is just to give you a snapshot of the work that we're doing. Next slide, please. Yes, ma'am.
I know a lot of the emergency room staff has been very focused on their safety and security. And as you alluded to, that connection to Glick with the ambulances coming in, you know, we can't really wand people very well for firearms.
Yes.
And can you speak a little bit about that front desk and how its security gets enhanced by what you're planning as part of this overall refresh of how people are coming in?
Yeah, we don't have the detailed design yet, but you know, and I was just at the Planning Design Construction Summit in Atlanta a few weeks ago. Jim and I were there, and I did attend. I went, hey, what's the latest in the industry for safety and security for emergency departments? You know, we are more advanced than most people around the nation just because we are a level 1 trauma center in an urban setting. But, you know, there's always those questions of, you know, those people coming in the front door, your registration people are exposed. You know, so having, you know, bullet resistant glass and things like that. Those are all the things that we're trying to do in this overall conceptual design that will work with the design team. You know, we don't want it to feel like it's, you know, a prison or a jail or anything like that, but how do you build in that security and still have a welcoming, patient-centered access point. So even in that front entrance, kind of pulling that evolved system, the weapons detection system, a little bit away from the entry. So you go through security first and then you enter in is some of the concepts that we're working on right now. So, and Jim and I were just with Chief as well. He was talking about a different type of technology that they're using, you know, because it's difficult to wand patients coming in because they're on a metal cart. There's a new technology he's looking at where they can kind of scan the patient for any weapons at all too, so.
And the scan doesn't pick up the metal on the
Yes.
device that they're on. So a question of yours.
Yes,
I can't resist,
yes,
because I've gotten a lot of feedback from our patients in labor coming through the very same doors, family
Yes.
medicine. You use the word jail or prison, that's exactly what they call it.
Yep.
And so if this is an opportunity to create a different entry point for these patients and families, that's not that, would be
yes.
maybe impossible, but now's the time to talk about it, because we get a lot of feedback that does not feel good.
Again, it's the front door to our hospital, really. And so that's what, you know, our goal is to make that much more patient friendly. Agreed, your patients do come in that way. And it's just, you know, it just hasn't had the focus. You walk in, it feels like you're still outside when you walk in. And then kind of everything's kind of makeshift right now as we've had to put things in place. So we want to be deliberate about the design, exactly including, you know, the women's and children's patient population, as well as, you know, we're looking at a satellite retail pharmacy in that area as well, so.
That's why that's area one is sort of the main focus. And I think maybe Dr. Alexander, to your point, by parsing this up a little bit, it allows us to enable or to be able to do some of these things much earlier. So we're not waiting for the entirety. We're going to get to a point where we're comfortable enough with some of the aspects of the main entry. And that includes getting us all the way out to the curb, let's say, that we rethink that entire process so that it's more efficient and there's a proper direction to get in and out and it has the right feel and support. That could be done earlier than other
Well,
things.
thank you for thinking about it. It's the time to think about it.
No, it's,
Yeah. Yeah, and I think just having the global picture, even when we open up the outpatient health center, you know, the flow of traffic, and it only makes sense that you enter the outpatient health center this way, you enter GLIC this way, you should enter the ED this way. So patients are covered as well as they enter. So we're trying to be much more strategic about a lot of that, so. So here's the time frame that we have right now for phase one. We are continuing into schematic design. We've asked for more participation from other providers and staff in the ED, as well as security, patient experience. So we'll go through the design process through August, construction documents, and then we hope before the end of the year to get started. And we think that phase one will take about 9 months. Again, it's an operating ED, so we're gonna have to, you know, have some phasing as we go through this. So it will not be painless, but it's well overdue. Any questions on the ED? Okay, next slide, please. Outpatient plaza. So again, as everybody knows, we're keeping this building, and the plan is once we open up the outpatient health center, the majority of the clinical departments will relocate there. A few of the clinical departments will stay in this building, and then it basically gets backfilled with community-facing programs and administrative programs so that we can begin to empty out these legacy buildings that we have. So this first phase, again, this is phase one of this project, is to go ahead and do some cosmetic upgrades. As you know, we thought the building was coming down, so a lot has not happened in the past couple of years. So, and especially we're looking at areas where a lot of our patients walk in and enter the building. We'll refresh those areas that we know aren't going to change in the next 2 to 3 years as we, you know, shift patients and services around. So we're going to go ahead and start working on that this year. Also, with Karen and her team, we're going to start upgrading some of the MEP things. Elevators need to be refurbished. Some of the cooling systems need to be upgraded. So none of this is throwaway dollars. It's all, you know, to get these buildings prepared for the next, you know, 15, 20, 25 years for us. So this is just kicking off now. We anticipate between both the cosmetics and the MEP to spend maybe about $12 million this year so far. Questions on that? A quick update on the signage that we all looked at last time, just a couple more pictures. the new branding that you see out there. We continue to move site to site. We were focused on the exterior signage. So again, having standardization throughout the system on all of the buildings that we are located at, whether we own them or lease space in them. So these are just a couple examples of, the main monument sign at the street level, what's on the building, and then the directories once you drive into the different sites there. So, and we are initiating right now the interior signage for all of these buildings as well. I think with the first 11 buildings, that's in process right now. If you go into some of the buildings, Parma is a great example. The wayfinding is, it's hard for patients to find their way. That it's just outdated. So again, we're bringing in the new brand into all of the buildings. So next slide just shows you, we plan to have all of this done before the end of the year. Also through the SOUP team, we're kind of owning the signage and wayfinding process for the system. So we just completed 2 competitive bids to bring a consultant on board with us to help us with overall wayfinding, and then to have a standardized process for, all the signage within the system. Somebody that knows all the language that we can use, somebody knows where we need to use Spanish or whatever else, build in all of those standards, and then have a process for those to be produced and installed for us as well. So very exciting. We're glad we can pull it all together and hopefully perpetuate a good process moving forward. As we move so many people around, it'll be easier to find. Any questions on that? Oh, and I think the next slide is the new project that we were just approved for is a new PET CT scanner that will be added to the imaging department in the Glick Center. The space was shelled out as part of the original plan for Glick for any future expansion. So the team is in process of selecting that equipment. And then we are in the process of bringing on board the architect and engineer because it's truly shelled space. So we have to do all the MEP planning and design planning for that. So again, this piece of equipment is going to be new technology for us. Really helps them image 2 times faster than what we can do today. And especially they have some new radioisotopes for neurological and oncological procedures that they're doing. So easy for me to say. So yeah, so that will become, we don't have a timeline on that yet. And I think Diane was trying to move quickly, going back to the tariff issue and all that, to procure this piece of equipment. Typically, the vendors will hold those manufacturing of that equipment until we need it too. So hopefully we won't have to store anything. But we'll have a timeline on this probably next time that we meet as well. So any questions? Thank you.
All right, next slide, please. We'll touch a little bit on campus parking. Obviously, going to be some changes to assignments as we get ready to open the outpatient health center. I know internally we've been working to update our own occupancy study to know how heavily used each of the garages is and who's all in those garages. We're going to take that information and then we're working with our design team on access to the garages as we reassign folks to new places so that the outpatient health center, when we get that operational, that we can get patients obviously as close to their destination as possible. So the Apex or P1 and the OPP P9 will probably be the 2 primary ones since they're immediately adjacent, but then looking at how we're going to distribute folks to the rest of the garages. In addition to that, we're going to bring on board a consultant that will help us with the traffic as well as parking so we can ensure that we understand the flows of people arriving from off campus to campus, where they're coming from and all that. So that's kind of an in progress thing. So we'll have more to report on that actually next time, but we understand as a key component to making sure that the building opens successfully. Let's go to the next slide. In the meantime, the organization does have a new shuttle. You'll see the note there that it has a capacity of 15, so it's actually a step van like you'd have at the airport instead of the smaller vans we've been running. And in addition, that 15 includes 2 wheelchair locations, so it's a fully accessible. So that's been a real benefit to add that. So I'm looking over here at Brian. I know we're pretty thrilled about doing that. So I thought it was worth a picture. Excellent. That'll keep us going this year. Let's get into the next slide because I wanted to talk just a little bit about open space planning. We talked some about this last time and some of the analysis that was being done. These are just a couple of slides for today that show the results of some of that investigative work that led us to, this is really sort of a heat map showing where all the pedestrian activity is and partly where it could be. And the density of it, you can see the radius of this is only a quarter mile, so there's a lot of activity, and obviously everything's sort of based around Scranton. But it helps us understand where open space makes sense and the kinds of open spaces are that we want to use. So if we go to the next slide, that led us to this, that really starts to understand how the campus is used. So you have a zone that's really teaching research a little bit more internally focused, but for that kind of function. And then as we get toward our patient care areas, it's really sort of quality access areas. A zone is sort of the way they've called that. But thinking those are more shared kinds of spaces where patients and visitors are as likely to use them or more likely to use them, but staff will also be able to use them. And then as we move to the Scranton side and toward 25th, you have the community. It's much more community available. And so as you're looking at sort of the diagrams, what they're starting to tell us is sort of the movements around the site, how that can change, starting to look really closely about the entire 25th Street frontage by changing the nature of the outpatient pavilion and its use. The idea of having community resource kinds of locations in the atrium area, how that changes our thinking about what that door to 25th Street could be like. I mean, there's a bus stop right out there, and how that might be more open and inviting to the public. So all of this is leading in that direction, helping us start to come up with concepts of how we might do that. So just wanted to give you an update on that. We've still had our city architecture who's helped us with this so far is still engaged to do a little more studying for us. But we should have something a little more developed that we can start really talking in some seriousness with the community about what might work and are we hitting all the things that are of interest. We're also, by the way, we've had internal groups provide input to this too, and we'll be going back to them and appreciate that. So it's not just external, it's really everybody who might use this. We're trying to get their opinion and input. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, wanted to take just a moment to build on some of the slides we've shown the past 2 meetings about how we're addressing legacy buildings. Again, we've got sort of our goals of, again, the ultimate goal in a way is trying to complete the work of Campus Transformation 2.0, which moves us into the new buildings, uses as few of the old buildings as we need to keep our operation working well, but creates the space on campus for future development, whatever might come out of the strategic exercise we're doing right now. That's sort of the main kinds of activities. Guiding principles, you can see, you can read them yourself, but we know that Ramble Camp, we have a significant commitment to research and education on site. We know we're using our newest buildings for all the patient care, but also started to have thoughts about, what our guiding principles are for how we're going to organize administrative tasks, coordinate and use space wisely. So we're not using more than we need to, as an example. And there are functions potentially on campus that can go elsewhere. I'm looking at Brooklyn Heights for that. So let's go to the next slide.
Question.
Yes.
What would be some examples of non-campus functions relocating to Brooklyn Heights?
I could tell you one would be like our office. We're doing work all over the organization. It's nice to be based here, but certain parts of our group could be anywhere within the system. So I've worked at places where the project management and some of those folks are sort of centrally located because they spend their day, might be out at Beechwood today, Cleveland Heights or Brecksville. So I think people like us whose reach is beyond a single location where we frequently have input around, it's a function like that.
How many?
What?
Accounting.
Well, accounting function, some of the IT who are already out at Brooklyn Heights, for example. So those that are more corporate in nature rather than site specific in nature. And so we've got to kind of go through this internally to say, are there others? The other thing I will note, and you'll see it here shortly, but Brooklyn Heights, there has a certain amount of space, but it's not as big as you might think. So all of Brooklyn Heights, the square footage we have, there's about the same size as the OPP2, just one of the pavilions on LPP.
Do we own
It
that
seems,
building?
what's that?
We own. the
Yes, we do.
building?
Some of them seem bigger just because the site is so large and because we have an atrium and some of those things make it feel bigger than it is, but it's an opportunity. So I just wanted to show you this to give you a sense of the scale of what we're dealing with. So our current patient care facilities, and this will include when the new outpatient center is open, it's just under 1.4 million square feet on campus. Ramel Camp is at in about 160,000. So all of those are still going to be here. The buildings we're looking at reusing are the outpatient plaza, really Belgrave and the business services complex. Old research, we're keeping, not really going to use it any more than we have to other than as a connector, but it happens to be exactly in between Belgrave and Ramel Camp. So we're going to keep it for now, but the space, it's about 60,000 square feet, we're not going to use it. And then the church. So we're still working out options for the church, but it is one of the locations we're thinking for the police department. So we'll come back with more on our thinking of that. Nothing's fixed yet, but just so we know that those are the things that are available to us. In the bigger picture, as we look down the road a little bit further, sort of the second part of this, ultimately, we'd like to figure out where could we put people who are in Belgrave and in the business services complex at some point in the future, because you can see if those buildings were eventually able to leave, that leaves us a much bigger footprint on campus to be able to do whatever the organization needs in terms of space over the next, 10 to 25 years. So, and that's kind of important to think about because it guides a little bit on how much we invest in certain buildings compared to others. So this is just to give you a sense, but when we're done, the big takeaway too from this is we're able to walk away from over 1 million square feet of space that no longer really serves in the best interest of the organization. And those are the buildings that we demolish. Questions? Let's go to the next slide then. Okay, so priorities, we said we'll complete the Glick construction project, campus open space. We've got some more engagement to deal with there, concept development, ambulatory. Again, there's more here, but there are a lot of projects that really all knit together that support the organization and improve access and that sort of thing. So it's not just ambulatory enabling, it's some of these follow-on projects really fit the same mold. And really at this point, picking and choosing which are the projects that advance us the most, which ones should wait a while, and maybe they get moved into next year as we manage our resources wisely and trying to get these things done. Outpatient center, we're on a good path with construction. Our main focus is to keep it going and try to gain time, and we'll probably spend more time talking about transition planning and activation over the next couple of meetings because will be much more in front of us than completion of construction. And then the legacy buildings, there are a couple of other things we're working on in addition to that sort of study. We've got a little bit more detailed analysis, really almost a department by department of how we would pick things up and where we would move them. We're going to improve on that a little bit, and that's something we'll probably spend more time with senior management on here in the upcoming months. In addition to that, we've had assistance from design engineers who worked here for a number of years, helping us identify all the existing routing of services that support the existing buildings. We can start to figure out the plan for how we're going to disconnect them all and tear them down, as well as how to reroute utilities to support that. And then in addition, and Karen's going to talk about this in a little bit, we've completed a study that analyzed the condition of all these buildings so that can help us build our understanding of what we're going to need to invest in the ones we are keeping and where we have some choices to make. So we'll be able to get a cost as to, and phasing for how all this could work. So that's what's in front of us. And we should be able to move back and give you much more information next time we get together. Expect good progress on that. So next slide. I think that's it for the campus transformation portion. So Karen.
Okay.
Hand it over to Karen. Next slide, show facilities management update, please.
Well, while we're waiting those to be, for that slides, those slides to be loaded, I'll,
There you
there
go.
we go. Okay, next slide, please. As usual, I'll present our staffing matrix for a department that's over 120 people. We're in pretty good shape right now. We had 3 open positions. 2 have been hired already. One started Monday and the other one starts in May. The only position we have open right now is for a director of environmental health and safety. And we're actually in the process of interviewing 5 to 7 really excellent candidates. So we expect to fill that pretty soon. Although we do have an aged workforce, and at any point in time, I'm expecting almost 1 to 3 people could retire at any time. Our vacancy rate is normally about 2.5%, has been. It's going to drop a little now, given that we've got all these positions filled. And we normally run about a 2 FTE vacancy simply from FMLAs and things like that. We had one gentleman who took off for 4 months, so that was a big hit. Next slide, please. So our capital projects have slowed a little from what they were last year. We've initiated 57 projects year to date for the total of over $3 million. 2 of those have been major planned facility projects, including boiler replacements and line isolation monitor replacements in the OR. In addition to that, the bulk of our projects are what we're regrouping projects this year into our planned projects, our contingency or break fix projects, and then other projects that we're initiating on behalf of others. So we've got about 51 break fix projects that we've kicked off so far. Most of those are smaller dollar volumes. The total for those are about 800,000 right now. The 2 strategic projects are about 2 million. And the 4 we've initiated for other departments are about $250,000. An example of what we've initiated for other projects is we just completed an elopement deterrent project in the Glick Center, whereby we've added card access to the perimeter stairwell doors to prevent people from eloping. That won't stop our staff from using them because they'll have card access, but there's a 20-second delay on the doors so that if somebody goes there and tries to push out, there's an alarm that sounds and staff can respond and hopefully catch them before they escape. So, let's see. And then next slide, please. So what Jim has asked me to kind of give an overview of the Gordian Facilities Assessment that we spent last year conducting. What I'm going to do is start with a brief refresher on what we've accomplished for those that are newer to our board, and also to remind everybody what we've done so far. We had a total of 83 buildings we assessed, and this was all of the buildings we own as well as the buildings we lease. So the properties that were fully assessed are buildings that we own, and we're responsible for all the systems in those buildings, HVAC, electrical, whatever. In lease properties where we only have a cosmetic interest in those buildings and the landlord is responsible for HVAC and other things, that's on the landlord to take care of. We have a total of 72 buildings, excluding the parking lots and garages. And you can see 3.4 million square foot of buildings and 6.7 million square feet of total facilities. We've listed all the buildings and the assets, or what we call our assets. We've evaluated the condition of those buildings. And we've also determined what improvements are needed, what systems are aged beyond their useful life and need to be replaced, and that sort of thing. And also identified the costs, the probable costs associated with each of those at the current time. And then also they've prioritized roughly which things need to be done first and which things can wait a while. And then these are projected out through 20 years. So we've got a really good understanding of what our facilities look like and what they're going to need over the next 20 years. In addition to that, they create what's called a facility condition index. This index is either considered a 0 or a 1. Some people call it 0 or 100%. The bottom line is the lower the number, the better the condition of the facility. The higher it gets, the worse off it is. And then we've modeled some future cost options so that we can help plan in the future. This will support our decisions for what buildings we keep, how much we invest in them, at what point do we decide to cut these buildings loose and build something new.
You're probably going to get to this, but the end result is not a static report. It's really a database of information. And so we've been trained on how to use that. So we can run our own models and say, well, we want to keep this building for X number of years. What are the key things we need to look at? And so we can use that, give it different information, and create different versions of how we want to go ahead. So for us, I think that's the really important part of this. I don't have to read the table. I can actually create the model of how we want to figure out where we want to put the money, if we want to put it there or not. So this is going to help us do those kinds of things as we build an approach for what we're going to do with the existing building. So that's the power of it. Go ahead.
Is this model new to us?
This particular one? Yes, interesting. Gordian, as a firm, bought a firm called, was it VFA? And VFA did the study here in 2011 or
10.
earlier, 2010. And I used them before at another place where I was. So I knew their work. And so what they've been able to do is update that study. I think what's new to us is sort of the way that information is compiled and how we're going to be able to use it compared to what you would have done a number of years ago. But the idea of the information is not new. The currency of it is, and our ability to use it is.
Okay. So basically, in order to do the assessment, we've given the Gordian people access to our drawings and blueprints so they can see what we have in our buildings. We've also given them all of the capital improvements we made since the last study in 2010, which was a voluminous list. And they've incorporated all that before they sent their teams out here to evaluate the buildings. And they sent out a team of an architect, a mechanical engineer, an electrical engineer. They start at the roof, they check the roof out, and then they go floor by floor and come down through the buildings, looking at everything, cataloging everything, taking pictures of everything that is particularly in bad shape so that we've got a good visual record of what's going on in the buildings. After that, they go back to the office and they translate this into their database, which is very detailed. And all of this is based on standards that are commonly used in the industry. And then the cost data is based on RS means data that is adjusted for Cleveland and adjusted for soft costs as well as construction costs. Means is just a construction cost database, so they've got adjusted for architects and engineering fees and all the other soft costs associated with the construction project. And then they, after all that's compiled, it comes to us in a spreadsheet, some 16,000 line items. And my staff, my senior staff and myself reviewed all those lines to make sure they were accurate. We questioned a few things, we changed a few other things, and got it as good as we could get it. At that point, it goes into a written document, and the database becomes accessible for us to use and create. Next slide, please. So when they go through the facility, as I said, as an architect, a mechanical and electrical engineer, I basically described everything they did, the photos. One of the things to recognize is when they put the cost model together, they're building a cost model to refurbish, replace the building in like kind. And what I mean by that is, if it was designed as an ambulatory care facility, what would it take to refurbish it to bring it up to current standards of a good ambulatory care facility? Doesn't take into account that we want to change its function in the future. They have no idea what we're going to do with it in the future. So it's just basically what it is today. How do you bring it up to current standards?
So that's one of the things where we have to add our own judgment in based on what we're going to use it for and the length of time we're going to use it. And the other thing note here too is we've talked about the costs were based on what we understood before the end of last year, right? So we're going to have to keep track of that. Now on the plus side here, RS means is well known in our industry, construction industry, and is used widely across the United States. Most construction companies of all sorts of sizes use it as a baseline. So I'll probably be looking at them to see how they're updating based on what they see happening over this year, the next couple of years. So that's the advantage of not having a sort of a homegrown, although I think Gordian bought RS meetings.
Yeah.
But like I said, well-known in the industry with a wide reach, and so they are as good as anybody to help keep us on top of where we might be at with some of this cost. Yes.
Who and how are current standards determined? So if we're gonna model it to current standards, what does that mean?
I know how I'd answer, but go ahead.
So what, so if we've got a chiller that's 30 years old, it's beyond its useful life. And so they're going to price a current chiller to replace that old one.
And what they do, and they're thinking about it, is they're gonna look at national codes, the kinds of codes that CMS would look at. So National Fire Protection Association, the Electrical Uniform Building Code, those are the kinds of things to say, if you're gonna bring it up, these are the issues you have to deal with, and therefore here's how we get aligned with that. So again, it's national stuff, doesn't always apply in its specifics to the city. But the variations at this point are usually small enough that from for order of magnitude costing, we can deal with it. And we're aware of where the differences might be.
Well, you make an interesting point to the city. I have some familiarity with this Cleveland Building Department.
Yes.
So that's not necessarily our best guide, though. In other words, how current is the city?
Well,
So we had a whole series of codes and standards that were in the front end of the project that we agreed they were gonna follow. And so they're using the Uniform Building Code and the Ohio Building Codes for the project.
Good.
which often are, well, as you know, the iterations that are being developed today that are started ready to be used are often adopted 2 or 3 years later by different organizations. So I'm a little more familiar with Chicago, haven't been there recently, so their code is unique. But even the state, often they would be using, say, an electrical code that was originally introduced in 2021, for example. So it's a few years later, and that's not unusual. But part of this too is, as long as we've got a baseline as to which codes they were using, now we know where we're departing from when we look at it.
And then 40 of the buildings were modeled, and by modeled, I mean, they did a cursory review of the building with a generalist, but they were modeled in the system based on their blueprints and the drawings because they were newer than 5 years old. So Glick was modeled, and then they did a walkthrough to just verify what they had in the model because it's brand new. And that they also modeled some of the older legacy buildings that we know we're going to get rid of. So, next slide, please. So here's an example of some of the summary information that came out of the system. What we have on the left is all of our campuses, the 4 hospitals, all of the health centers have been grouped together as kind of one campus. And then the 2 separate ambulatory surgery centers are listed separately. The next column is the number of buildings that were included in each of those studies. You can see at the main campus, we have 32 buildings that are all conjoined together here in one way, shape, or form. The next column is the total value of these buildings, and this is what it would cost to replace the building today. The next column is the FCI cost or needs. These are the things they found that need to be fixed, improved, upgraded, replaced, whatever. And then the last column is the facility condition index that I spoke of. Basically, the facility condition index is a simple calculation of the needs divided by the total replacement cost of the building.
Before we get too much further, I just want to go back to that FCI cost, because what we've got in there, like certainly with the Metro Health Campus, that's everything that's in there, including buildings we want to walk away from. So I don't want people to get too anxious about the numbers yet, because this is sort of unscrubbed. Certainly there are investments we're going to need to make over time. This also isn't spread over time like it would be in real life. So this has some work to do, but it just lets you know the raw information we're starting with. Yeah.
So we can say over time, how long?
5 years.
1 to 10 or 1 to 5?
FCI is based on a 5, what's needed in the next 5 years.
Their recommendations.
Yeah.
So our goal would be to spend 1.2 billion in the next 5 years.
No.
And that's what I'm saying, because
Some of
that's why I wanted to stop here and have this conversation, because 2 things. One is there are a number of buildings, certainly on the Metro Health campus that's going away, but the other is, again, determining Some of those things we can choose that are not like code driven, and maybe other energy efficiency or other things where we can place those in a different time frame. Those could easily move out, or we could bundle some things together. So there's a lot of work that's got to go into this before you actually have a number that's one that you want to work from, and it's going to be significantly less than that, obviously. But I just wanted you to see this is the raw stuff that we're getting, and it's complete and thorough, and gives us the ability to make good judgments as we go ahead.
What's our annual or actual capital improvement projects? What does that usually run annually?
Some of the infrastructure projects have run between 6 and 10 million over the last 5 or 10 years.
And if we set aside the buildings we're walking away from, we've got a lot of new buildings that sort of skew us to a little lower number here for the next easily 5 years or so. So we've got room to maneuver. Yes.
Is there contemplation regionally, geographically, of some environmental exposure questions, tornadoes, floods, extreme heat that we're seeing elsewhere, Phoenix, certainly Kentucky floods elsewhere, that would factor into how we would need to think about doing things differently? My assumption is we're a little less exposed here, but we have no record of some of the extremes thus far. And I guess, is that a consideration of, if we were going to do things differently, would we consider these hardening ourselves against some of these exposures, in which case it would be a different view?
It would be a view that's really added to this, I would say. Again, as Karen was pointing out, this kind of brings it back to its original intended purpose in a way. But having run across this before, I think what you'd find in the newer buildings, for example, is that the structural stability or the lateral stability of buildings has increased a lot because of the higher winds, and particularly around here, that's probably one of our bigger things to deal with. Temperature extremes, probably already dealt with that in the past as codes have dealt with that.
If I could jump
Go
in
ahead
on
and jump
that.
in.
We've hardened the Glick Center as we built it, and other buildings as well. One of the things we've done, the codes don't require that we put air conditioning on emergency power, but we have made sure that the emergency systems will handle air conditioning in the Glick Center so that we can keep running during a power outage in the summer when things get really hot. A lot of our older buildings don't have that capability right now.
So interesting point, because that has less to do with the specific building that we're building than with the utility companies to provide us the services we need. So building in the redundancy to
Right.
cover for that failure and an event.
We
not
also
just the
have a
building.
very old electrical substation from CEI that feeds our campus, and we're only fed from one substation, so we don't have redundancy of 2 different locations in case that substation goes down. So we've built in a lot of capability in our electrical systems, not only to have emergency generation to keep us running for an extended period of time if there's power outage, but also to transfer between feeders from CEI. We're fed with 4 CEI feeders right now, and we have the ability internally to switch the campus from which feeder that we're being fed from. And we've used it when we've had power outage situations. Actually, we had one last month that impacted the legacy buildings. We've been running on the Glick feeder for the last couple of weeks, and we're getting ready to transfer it back right now.
Are our generators natural gas or diesel?
Diesel.
Diesel.
Yeah, they're too big for natural gas. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, next slide, please. So this is another slide that shows the FCI, and it gives us a kind of a, if we go to the top series of chevrons there, on the left side, our garages are fairly new, and so they're in pretty good shape, and they had an FCI, they're calling it 10% here. All of our campus buildings rate up in the close to 40. And our parking lots, which are pretty old and we haven't put a lot of money into them lately, they're in pretty bad shape. They're up in the an FCI of about 50%. So the first group is by use. The second group is by campus, and that's pretty much as you would expect as well. Brecksville is a newer building. It was completed in 2016, so it's got a very low FCI. Cleveland Heights and the health centers are a little bit newer. They're sitting around 20. Old Brooklyn campus, Parma, and the main medical The legacy buildings on the main campus are a lot older. A lot of those buildings are 50+ years old. So they're up in the upper 40s there. And then if you look at the bottom, this is kind of an overall representation. Look at the Glick Center, the central utility plant, the CUP, and the addition on the critical care pavilion are all relatively new. That's got a very low FCI. If you go to the big arrow in the center that says overall FCI of 0.335, that is all of the buildings taken into consideration right now. Over on the far right are all the buildings that we are planning to demolish, and that aggregate of those buildings to be demolished has an FCI of 0.73. So it's really high. If you subtract the buildings that have an FCI of 0.73, take them out of the equation, that leaves what they call the keepers with an FCI of 0.21. So it really improves the condition of our campus when we get rid of those legacy buildings. So I know there's kind of a lot there. Any questions? Okay, next slide, please. And this is just a representation of how we can forecast future costs. This is not representative of any building or any campus. The bars that you see are the amount of money being spent in any particular year. And the lines with the dots on the top are the FCI. And what it's representing is, you can see that if you continue to make a low investment, so they're saying that in the steady state condition, you're investing $1.7 million per year in this particular facility. If you keep doing that, it's going to remain at an FCI of near 6.6, which is high. If you spend 2% of the current replacement value, it might drop at a hair or two, but it's basically not making much of a dent. And about 2% of the current replacement value is what you would expect to spend on a new building going forward if you want to keep it in a good functional state for the rest of its life. This building is obviously beyond that. And then they're forecasting here that you spend $3.2 million a year, and you can see that over time, that does drop the FCI to somewhere just under 0.3. So it shows you what you can do with this, and we can model any of our buildings, the whole system, slice it and dice it any way we want. We can put in inflation factors of however we want it, and use it for figuring out what do we want to do next. So.
We talked about this in a previous meeting, about trying to anticipate the seismic and paradigm shifts of medical delivery. You know, if we were here in 2011, I think I'd ask the question, what's the rate of change over the last decade or so? And how do we see that change going forward over 20 years or 10? So we might not have seen the dramatic shift to outpatient care. So what's the next one? The one I've been thinking about is this notion of wearables and home-based diagnostic care, where all this stuff becomes less important than the delivery capacity of a decentralized healthcare system doing things, you know, in a micro neighborhood situation. I don't know if that's wacky thinking. So I'm looking at the medical doctors here primarily to say, you know, this is helpful. This is a classic forecast of our existing paradigms of how we're going to deliver. That's all we've got to work with. So, you know, it's tremendous stuff. However, our opportunity is to think about the paradigm shift. And when that happens, you know, we need to obviously invest differently, and we are at risk of misinvesting, not anticipating that. That's that's our job. That's our job as boards to try and figure that out. It's an impossible job, but it's what we're really here to do. So I would say I'm challenged, and I would very interested in, especially the medical delivery folks, to help me, to help you, to help us to think about what's possible out there and what does that mean.
I think you're spot on. You know, I think that we knew that telehealth would become important. And we're, you know, taking slow, steady steps in that direction. And then COVID hit and whammo, telehealth is here to stay, right? I think the next step is even further removed from the office and the hospital. It is in the home. Telehealth already happens in the home, but the technology around devices and the communication of information back and forth, I think that will be the next thing that we're gonna look at nice and steady. And God willing, there's not a pandemic that all of a sudden pushes that, or some other disaster. It's usually some sort of crisis or disaster that pushes us in that direction to make us rapidly change. So I do think we have to be prepared for the future of what technology will bring. I do think, however, not all of medicine is going to be able to practice there. And at the end of the day, you know, we will still need facilities to take care of patients. And we do have an aging population, so the inpatient piece, I think, will continue to grow, even though we're gonna move more things to the outpatient, right? I think we do have to have that balance of inpatient and outpatient, but be ready for the expansion of what we don't see right now, leveraging where people live, play, work, even more so.
You know, I think about the adaptability of what we have, and I know you build that in. But a simple thing, like in the future of Lakewood Hospital, one of the problems was the hallways were too narrow. You know, you couldn't get stuff down the hallway. The rooms were too small. You couldn't put stuff in the rooms, and so you couldn't get there from here. And I presume all this design anticipates that possibility so that we could move things.
Yeah, I would say particularly for the inpatient, not having been here for this one, but for others, the idea of the widened corridors. The one thing that our inpatient facilities have is sort of the high technology for diagnostic and also for interventional kinds of things. And that'll be likely to be a component in the future. So what I've seen is equipment gets smaller a little bit, but not so much, but its capability grows tremendously. And so there will be a need to have a place for those because that's the most efficient way, appropriate way to provide that care. So I think the uses within the envelope will modify and what we'll be able to do. And I think the what's been designed internally is modifiable, let's say. Certainly that's true of the outpatient area. You know, so we've shown the floor plans here before and it's nothing unusual. But for the last number of years, we've really gone toward trying to create pretty systematic, replicatable modules that we work within that can be for this type of clinic one day, it could be for another day, but the design is similar. And you can see they're built out of metal stud and drywall. So if we need to modify those in the future, we can. The key there has been to include enough of mechanical ventilation capacity, electrical capacity that will be able to handle those changes. So I think there will continue to be things where it makes most sense to show up at a specific location for it. Our ability to monitor people and their their compliance with what they're supposed to do, that may be the change. I'd like others to weigh in on that, but I think we've tried to build within the walls of the facilities we're building the ability to maneuver things around in the future to adjust.
Yeah, well, good. I'm delighted that you're contemplating all that. It's a critical element, and I guess I'm challenging myself here to get up to speed to think along with you.
I will say, I've been around long enough to see designs I worked on years ago be modified.
I will say, there's been a call for the collapse of inpatient care for my entire professional lifetime, and it hasn't. There's just an irreducible amount of, you name it, things that have to happen in the hospital. I think, the big accelerant to change, I actually think will be how we're paid. That'll be its own crisis. We talked about, a pandemic crisis, but before it was cool, Kaiser did 55% of their visits through telehealth. Why? Because they're the payer and medical health care provider. So everything you do is an expense because you already have premium dollars, right? Every surgery is an expense, not a revenue. Every admission is an expense, not a revenue. Every patient you see in the office is an expense. So because they handle both elements of risk, they were downsizing the number of offices and doing 55% of their visits virtually. So I think that's actually a very rapid accelerant, and we've been talking about it for as long as we've been in healthcare, and we're seeing it happen to some degree, you know, at-risk payment models. But I think that's the thing that will force us and accelerate us faster than anything.
Well, that's true about that. I mean, I think one of the things we're seeing in terms of why the hospitals are so full is because of consolidation of hospitals, of all the hospitals that we've lost in the city.
Yeah, that's right.
And at the same time, I think we're pretty close to what I would consider maximum consolidation at this point. I mean, I mean, you know, with the loss of St. Vincent Charity, you're really looking at, you know, very small numbers of systems. I think that, so, but Chrissy's point about hospital in the home, we haven't even scratched the surface on hospital in the home. And mostly because it's inefficient for us right now. It's difficult for us to take care of, you know, of 50 people in 50 different sites versus taking care of 50 people in one site. So we got to kind of figure out how we're going to do that and how that goes. But I also agree that, you know, right now there's a financial disincentive for us to do things virtually. So we get paid less to take care of somebody who's on, you know, in a virtual environment, whereas we get paid more if we take care of them, you know, in a location. So you do have to flip the payer model to be able to make that happen. But, you know, what do they say? You know, predictions are difficult, especially about the future. You know, that we would have never, I mean, the towers were never wired for Ethernet capability, right? I mean, you know, but, you know, so you can only do what you know. And so the ability to move a building and change it, the Glick building was built to be able to be modified on the fly, so that there's a lot of things that can be added to that or subtracted from that to make that happen. So
maybe the final thought. We're in a regional delivery system. We're the smallest of three big players. Let's assume that all the other two are debating the same questions, making the same investments. We're not going to be efficient as a region because we're going to be doing it in our own silos. There may be, for reasons of cost and reimbursement, a compelling need to share resources in some creative way like we've never done before. I would say, from an urban planning standpoint, the byword right now is the only survivability in the absence of what historically has been federal support for transformative investments is collaboration. It's the only way you can create synergies to address common problems. And we have to do it in ways, in a manner we've never even considered in the scale and scope. Culturally, that's really hard. I mean, cities are balkanized view, mayors have their limited view, and sharing and is very constrained. But I think there may be some merit to challenging ourselves strategically. Board members, maybe working with board members elsewhere, say, look, folks, we're in a world of scarcity here. Yet our needs are going to be more compelling. Let's think about some collaboration sharing that makes sense for us all, so that we don't duplicate and become redundant. But anyway, I think that these numbers are big. Well, anyway, the point is, I think there's an opportunity. There's threats, but and I would say from an urban planning standpoint, initially the threats are catastrophic, but they probably don't have to be if we think a little differently. They're going to be diminished. They're still threats. They don't become opportunities necessarily, but we can minimize them. And I'm thinking healthcare may be in a similar capacity. So, and that's sort of maybe a sermon, but that's in the urban world, which I think about all the time. I read about it. That's sort of the norm of what the panic is dealing with right now. And we may be close to that elsewhere.
We do a bit of this already, but not a ton, right? That we don't have our own cardiovascular surgical team, right? We have a partnership with the clinic, and they send somebody to us, and really complex cases we send to them, and then they send back to us for the rest of the rehab. You know, so there's a bit of that happens. You know, it's a bit of what we look at for pediatrics, you know, specialty care. So there are some examples of that, and you know, we could think about leveraging it. I mean, any day now, the clinic is gonna announce their level 1 trauma center. Are we a city big enough for 3 level 1 trauma centers? No, you're not. So those are examples of where there's the redundancy that, these patients were served really well when there was one, and it was us. Right? So I think we have to think about that, and there has to be some sort of authority, if you will, that says, hey, here's what we really need, but we lack.
By the way, in the urban world, and in Northeast Ohio is really a good example, there is no central authority. I mean, really, regions that are able to rise faster create that centralized capacity of leadership. We don't have it here. And so we don't have it in healthcare, apparently. I know we don't have it on the urban front. And so part of our challenge may be we've got to create it. It's the burning platform question. That's a whole different assignment. But it gets to, if we're going to invest on the existing paradigms, and we need to, we're at risk of overdoing it or underdoing it almost every day. I was even thinking a little more conventionally, hey, we need a little more operating room space. Let's go rent it rather than build it. I don't even know if that makes sense, but anyway, you get the idea.
Yeah. No, and it's a little bit what we think about like at Parma. We'd like to do more orthopedic surgeries there. The hours aren't big enough. The doors to the hospital rooms, not big enough. So there are some, what would appear to be opportunities, right, that we just can't make work.
Okay.
Good.
Are we finished? Well, thank you for those updates. I think we're about ready to go into executive session. I would like to ask for a motion to move into executive session, discuss hospital trade secrets as defined by ORC 133361, and to consider the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee, or the investigation of charges or complaints against a public official, and to conference with the public body's attorney to discuss disputes involving the public body that are the subject or pending or imminent court action as defined by ORC 121.22. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Second.
John Moss just left, but I'm sure he would second it.
Not quite sure it works that way, but
Second.
all right. Thank you.
Artist. There you go.
All right. Thank you, artist. So we'll do a roll call. Mr. Arnold, I just start with you.
Yes.
Mr. Corlett, is he back?
No.
Is Mr. Moss back?
Stepped out.
Mr. Summers?
Aye.
And I say aye. Did I leave anybody out?
Oh, you're good.
Okay. All right, so if people will step out.
Okay. 1 second.
You are back in public session. Back in public session.
Is everyone back?
Yes, we're back.
Okay. So we're back, and I think, like I said, we have a couple of things we do need to consider for vote. The first is I'd like to ask for a motion. This is something we go through, I think, pretty much annually to approve a recommendation to the president and CEO of the mental health system to approve the selection of pre-authorized professionals.
Talk about that real quick?
Yeah.
We didn't talk about it. This wasn't talked about in executive session.
No, it wasn't.
No,
I
I
can
wasn't.
just remind it.
Yeah, go ahead and
if I may.
explain what it is. We do this every year.
Okay.
pretty much, yeah.
We do. Annually, we put out basically requests for proposals for firms interested in providing architecture, engineering, construction, specialty services, that kind of thing, at a value of not to exceed $50,000. And we get lots of respondents. I was here about the same time last year for last year's. So this list will be a list we can draw from as needs arise during the year for quick turnaround time on those small engineering issues, things like that. Interesting, we had a large number of respondents. I think there were 74, something like that. And after the evaluation, all 74 were qualified. So anybody who put in submittal to us is on this list. I've looked through it. I know we've got a wide range of architecture and engineering capability, lots of good specialty services as well. So the planning, design, construction, campus transformation facilities relies on this quite a bit during the year when we need to get very quickly an assessment of a structural condition or something like that. So that's how the list is comprised and how we do it. And next year we will do it again and redact it. So any questions about it? Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we have a motion. That we get a second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion passes. Now, second, we did in executive session discuss a recommendation to the president and CEO of the mental health system to approve the renewal of lease in Beechwood, Ohio. Are there any questions, comments before we vote on this recommendation? Okay,
I move that we pass this resolution.
thank you. Could I have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Do we have any other business before this group? If not, yes.
Dr. Walker,
Yes.
I just noted that we included in the packet was a report from RSM, who does our, the analytics on construction documents, that sort of thing. And I don't know if we have anybody.
I think they dropped off.
I think they dropped off the line, but I just wanted to call out, it is in your packet. Take a look at it. We will have them here for the next meeting to do a presentation on what they've done. They will have some closeouts to do, but I just want to make sure we didn't miss that it's there.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? All right, then we will adjourn with 3 minutes to spare. Thank you.
Not a big fan of mental health.